So I've been really curious and really interested in understanding how the brain works. Why is it that some people have amazing lives and other people suffer? Why is it that a situation will happen to two people, the exact situation, and one person sees the possibility and the opportunity, and the other one focuses in on all the problems? How does that happen? And more importantly, what can we do so that we're in the group of people that are focusing on the solution and having the amazing results? Hi, my name is Annette Bau, your host of the Wealth Inside and Out podcast. I'm a certified financial planner and founder of the Millionaire Insider. For over 30 years, I have been advising and researching the top 1% of millionaires, and I am passionately obsessed with money, mindset, and the intersection of self-worth and net worth, and how the two connect and allow us to live fulfilled and wealthy lives on our terms. I'm a Midwestern girl who had a dream, began investing $25 a month 35 years ago, and today have a multi-million-dollar net worth. I teach the tried and true that only someone with over 3 decades of experience advising millionaires would know. This podcast is different about much more than money. We talk about mindset, success, money blocks, worth barometer, and all aspects of money and topics from practical manifestation, along with real-world how-to and everything in between, with the goal of making your journey easier and more fun. Think of this as coffee, actually matcha tea, learning real-world common sense money and life advice from a BFF that you can start applying today. If you want to create a financially free life you love, you are in the right place, my friend. This is the Wealth Inside and Out podcast. It was fascinating how many people out of the over 100 plus people I interviewed that wanted to know more about me, how I think, what I do. I'm thinking it's not that exciting, but I will say that I've re-recorded this episode several times because I'm a little uncomfortable sharing about me. And I also know that if I can't get comfortable talking about creating wealth and being wealthy, it's difficult for you to have a belief and understanding that it's an okay thing to have money. And as long as you have a perspective of your life, your values, it's a great thing. So I'm going to share lessons that I've learned with the goal of helping you on your journey to living fulfilled and wealthy on your terms. And I want to admit that sometimes when I think about my life and what I've achieved, it feels surreal. Now, don't get me wrong. I have worked really hard to achieve the success I have in my life with my money and my relationships, but it's humbling, shocking, and amazing all in one. When I figured out the importance of money early in my life, I just wanted some. I just thought I couldn't even imagine what it would be like to have money and be able to have choices, to travel where you want, to eat what you want, to do what you want. And over time, I have come to realize that money matters to the extent it can help us to create and live a fulfilled life. And so many other things that really matter don't cost a lot of money. They may cost time, they may cost emotions, but not money. And one thing I know for certain is that money brings out more of who we are, and with great wealth or great success comes great responsibility. And that understanding has made me a better person. My goal is that the insights I provide you today are going to help you to create a financially free life you love and to make your journey easier and even more fun. The information we provide is not intended to replace any investment, financial, tax, or any other advice. Before beginning, please consult with your own team of advisors and review your situation. For today's show notes, go to themillionaireinsider.com/5. For all show notes, go to themillionaireinsider.com/podcast. If you want one of the best resources on millionaires, you can access our Millionaire Secrets at themillionaireinsider.com/20MIS. That's 20MIS. If you want one of the most valuable, insightful resources available on millionaires, how they think, what they do, you can access this free guide where I share 20 of the best millionaire insider secrets I've learned over the last 35 years advising and researching wealthy clients at themillionaireinsider.com/20MIS. The insight you're going to learn in this resource is priceless and it's unavailable because very few people have spent 35 years entrenched in the lives of millionaires. Again, you can access it for free at themillionaireinsider.com/2020MIS. You're going to love this resource. So let's dive in. So, a couple of things I want to share. I have recorded this, as I mentioned several times, and I've changed these lessons a bunch. But this is actually one of the original recordings I did. And when I went back over it, and I thought, this really does help you understand how I think and how I make decisions, which is what you wanted to know. So, I decided, all right, I'm going to use this episode. But one of the things I want you to get as you're listening to this is that I've always been curious and fascinated with people's lives and really seeing how people think and what they do. And especially people that are really successful, not just people that have money, but have money and an amazing life. It's like, what do they do differently? How can I show up more like they show up and or achieve similar results? So I've been really curious and really interested in understanding how the brain works. Why is it that some people have amazing lives and other people suffer? Why is it that a situation will happen to two people, the exact situation, and one person sees the possibility and the opportunity, and the other one focuses in on all the problems? How does that happen? And more importantly, what can we do so that we're in the group of people that are focusing on the solution and having the amazing results? I grew up in a small town in South Dakota, and originally we were like right on the border of Wyoming and South Dakota on a 10,000 acre ranch. That's where I lived for my first literally like 4 years of my life. Most of the land was leased and we didn't have a lot of money, and my mom would make all of our clothes. We lived in a home. It wasn't a mobile home, but it was a home that you could move. It was just kind of funny. But at holidays, we would always get like one gift, and it was major. One of the things that I realized is growing up without a lot of money, where you were thankful for literally everything, it makes you have a very different perspective. My father, who is now deceased, but he was almost 20 years older than my mother, and he had lived through the Great Depression. And I think anyone that has gone through a period of time where they don't have enough food, they don't have enough anything, has a completely different perspective. And I think one of the reasons why I'm probably so good with money is just observing how hard my parents had to work for it. So the second lesson is that money gives us choices as well as more control of what happens in our lives, meaning our ability to choose. So my parents lost the lease because they didn't have the money to buy the property. And I remember at the time, I knew we were moving to town. We ended up moving to Wyoming, a small town where my father, who only had an 8th grade education, became a plumbing contractor. He did his apprenticeship. And it was really hard for him because he wasn't really good at reading and writing. And I think back on that now and I think, oh my gosh. And my dad always wanted to learn. He loved reading later on in life, and he really taught himself to read. But the reason he dropped out of school is he had to walk 8 miles to and from school, and he just couldn't do it. And he wasn't able to ride the horses because they needed the horses to work on the property. So I think a lot of times we think how hard our life is. And I think, gosh, I just can't even imagine what that would be like. And I remember when I was in college, I really wanted to drop out. I just hated it. And my dad would not let me. I wanted to start my own company to start making money. He said, no, you have to finish and get your degree. And gosh, now I'm so thankful. But at the time, I was so mad. All right, lesson 3, figure it out. So we moved to a town in Wyoming, and we didn't have a washer or a dryer. And so we had to go to the laundromat to do our laundry. And my neighbor who lived across the street had a baby and a 2-year-old. And at the time, I was like 4.5. I mean, this is just insane. Some of you guys are going to be on, what? I know. Every time I think about it, it just is cringeworthy. But then I think of my daughter at 4, and I remember I heard my OBGYN was letting her child fly at 4 or 5. I think 5 was the youngest, and I think this woman's crazy. And then I met my daughter. My daughter was more responsible flying than I was. But that said, when I wanted to watch these kids and I wanted to play with them. And so she would let me babysit. And so she'd pay me a little bit of money, but my mom would look out our front window and see me holding the baby with one hand and the 2-year-old with the other walking across the street. And she said she'd have a coronary. And the woman's like, I just don't know why the kids wake up every time you watch them. Well, it was because I'd go wake him up. I'd go poke the baby just gently to wake him up because I wanted to hold him. But I started making money at 4. And then we moved to Spearfish, South Dakota. And that's when I started my millionaire entrepreneurial journey. So I would make yarn on hangers and sell those. I'd babysit. I even mowed yards. I house sat. I did anything I could to generate money. And I think back on it, I think it was so funny. And then I tried cleaning houses. That didn't work very well. But then I finally got into becoming a waitress. And there it was great because you get paid based on the job you do and people love me. And I made a lot of money waitressing. And I actually put myself through school waitressing. But one of the things I also did was I was always about giving back. And I was always like the top donation raiser for like the Cancer Society of America when they'd have goals and you had to get a certain number of donations and then ride your bike. And part of it was I was forced to do work because if I wanted new clothes at the beginning of the school year, I had to earn the money. So those things, while I was experiencing them, weren't ideal. But now looking back at them, I'm like, oh my God, they were so important. My kids expect so many things. And, you tell them how your childhood was and they roll their eyes. But boy, I had to figure it out and I had to do it if I was going to make it. Lesson 4, master your mindset. So I was a great runner. I was really good. But the problem was I didn't know how to control my emotions and I would get so nervous. And I remember one of my coaches who obviously didn't have a lot of mindset training either. And he said, Annette, you're going to be a good runner. You will never be a great runner. And he was right. But I made it to the National Junior Olympics and I ended up getting, I think, 3 medals, but I didn't get 1 medal in the 400, which was my best race because right at the finish line, somebody passed me. I just remember thinking, no matter what you're doing, just give it your all and then 10% more. And if I would have done that, I would have walked away with 4 medals. But I did learn early on, you got to master your mindset. And part of your mindset is learning how to live above the grid. And in episode 3, we're going to dive into the worth barometer, themillionaireinsider.com/3. My childhood wasn't ideal. I don't think a lot of people's were. And I spent probably about 20% of my life above the grid, 80% below the grid. Most of my life was below the grid because I didn't even know there was a grid. And you may not either. But once you know there is a grid and you know that there's a better life, now I'm about 80% above the grid, 20% below the grid. Lesson 5, learn how to use your brain. So it began in 4th grade and I had just won a spelling bee in a math contest and I was feeling so smart. Like I can still remember that moment because I'm not going to say the name of the kid, but I'm still friends with him. But he was so good in math and I had beat him. And I was like, oh my gosh. And my teacher said something to me that changed my life. She said, and to think, Annette, you're only using 3 to 7% of your brain. And I asked the logical question, well, what about the other 93 to 97%? And she replied, no one really knows. Well, it became my life's mission to figure it out. And that is a huge part of what I'm going to teach you on the Wealth Inside and Out podcast. All right, lesson 6, prepare, go with the unknown, and know you have what it takes to react in any situation. In high school, I was a cheerleader. And make a long story short, we had an event my junior year where me and one of the other cheerleaders were sitting up in the bleachers talking to some of the guys from another team. Like, not a big deal. Our wrestlers on our team were over talking to some of the cheerleaders on a different team. Well, one woman got mad that me and the other cheerleader were talking to wrestlers, and she went to the school board and tried to get us, first of all, kicked off cheerleading, which she didn't. And then she tried to get us to do manual labor. And I just remember my parents actually hired an attorney because he's like, you can't make them do manual labor because they were talking to some other boys. But make a long story short, I went for tryouts. Now, I know because I knew people that were on the board the year before, and I had the highest number of points of anyone trying out, so I should have made the team. But I got to tryouts, and there was that woman, like right in front of me. And it was yesterday, I just froze, like totally froze. And I was like, oh my God, And I just stood there. I didn't even do my cheer and I didn't make it. And at the time, it seemed so devastating. Like, oh my gosh, I'm not going to be a cheerleader my senior year. And one of my BFFs, she talked me into going out for cross country. And at the time, I'm like, no, no. But, I had been a good runner. And it was so important that I did that because I learned so much about myself. But more importantly, what I learned and why that was so impactful is because it had so many impacts on my career. And when I closed my first $1 million deal, I was able to go with the flow. And I felt the same emotions I had felt with that woman. But because I had been there before and I knew that I could go down one path of freezing and like not knowing what to do, I was like, hey, I can handle this. This is the unknown, but I'm capable of it and I don't have to freeze. About 10 days ago, I was skiing with my kids, which is right away a mistake, skiing and kids in the same sentence. And my younger son, who plays volleyball for the ASU, he has not skied in like 7 years. I'm like, I can ski. I outski him. Well, that was not true. But towards the end of the day, he was not that far ahead of me. I'm like, I'm going to catch him. Well, the problem is I took off too fast right from the top of the hill. And all I remember was one of my skis hit and then the other one crossed, but they didn't pop off. And I just remember I'm now in midair going backwards. If you don't have a lot of experience skiing, your normal reaction is you panic, right? You're like, you want to grip on, but what you got to do is you got to just relax and go with it. And again, that experience of knowing what happens when you freeze is devastating. And thank God, finally, after doing like a full 360, my ski popped off and I really hurt my knee. But thanks to my energy worker, my yoga teacher who does energy work, my massage therapist, my chiropractor, all the people I use, it is perfect. In fact, I was like, oh my gosh, I was like, if it doesn't get better, because it just kept getting worse and hurting, I'm going to have to go to an orthopedic surgeon. But when you know how to go with the flow, it doesn't matter whether you're skiing with your kids and you get in a major wreck or you are closing $1 million deal, you are going to be able to deal with it better. So huge takeaway, huge lesson. All right, lesson 7. You got to learn how to interact with all types of people. One of the things I'm so grateful for, I learned early on, I don't care whether it's the CEO or the janitor, you got to know how to communicate with people. When I was in high school, I was a waitress, and I lived vicariously through the millionaires who frequented our restaurant. In fact, that's when I really realized, like, people with money have amazing lives. And they would come in and share their stories about traveling. It was something I wanted to experience. I didn't ride in an airplane until I was 18. Our family vacations included a trip from South Dakota to Colorado, 8-hour trip in the car with 3 kids in the back. And we did that every other year. And then we got to our destination. We slept on the floor. We were there for maybe a week, and then we went back. And I remember thinking, I'd listened to the places these people had been, and I'm like, oh my gosh. And it was just absolutely fascinating. And it was at that point that I realized that is what I wanted. Lesson 8, do not underestimate anyone. Another life-changing event occurred where, make a long story short, I was getting my boyfriend out of trouble. He was always in trouble. And I think a large part of why I liked this guy was because he was always in trouble and it was so exciting. And I look back on it and I think, oh my gosh, a parent's worst nightmare. But make a long story short, an event occurred and his parents were like, we're meeting with your parents. And it was just really bad. But he's like, I don't want you guys going out anymore. And then when I was talking to my boyfriend, he's like, yeah, they don't really want me dating you because my family wasn't up to their standards. My dad was a plumber and we were considered a blue collar family. And while my mother had graduated from high school, my father only had an 8th grade education. My family just didn't measure up. It's interesting because I think back on that and I think, when somebody tells you that you're not enough because you have a blue collar job or because your family isn't affluent enough, that to me is like a huge red flag. And even to this day, if you meet me out on the street, I'm very unpretentious. I rarely have makeup on. I'm very down to earth. I think my humble beginnings really allowed me to be that way. But what I'm always fascinated with and what I love is I love it when I'm not dressed up and where people have no idea if I have money or not and how they treat me. And one of the things I'll say about my clients is I have so many multi-millionaire clients. I mean, high 8 and even 9-figure clients that you would never know had a lot of money. And the one thing about them is they're just really down to earth because I never ever assume anything, and I would never underestimate anyone. That's how they've become my client. Make a long story short, I saw him, oh my gosh, probably about 20 years ago, and he was managing a restaurant. And then my understanding is he became a manager of a chain restaurant. And now I believe he owns a couple of franchises. But what's so ironic is I probably have a bigger net worth than his entire family. Well, I don't think that's the point. I mean, I also have a fulfilled life, which I also think might have been missing from their family. Just don't underestimate anyone because of their parents, their race, their religion, their background. You need to look at how people show up and what they do. And that, for me, was one of the best lessons I had. It literally changed the trajectory of my life. I don't know that I would be where I am financially had I not experienced that. I mean, having somebody, not being able to date somebody because you don't have enough money is just like horrifying. I mean, I just cannot even, it's just beyond my comprehension. But anyway, it was my experience, and it was a good one. I mean, I'm actually more thankful for a lot of the things that happened that weren't great than not. And every time I hear that Garth Brooks song, thank God for unanswered prayers, you look back and you're like, oh my gosh, if I would have married that person, I don't even know that we would have lived to tell about it. It would have been such a disaster. I mean, I just celebrated my 25th wedding anniversary to an amazing man. And I'm like, oh, I'm so glad that blessing did not come to fruition. Lesson 9, embrace and learn from your past, plan for your future, and live in the present. So growing up in a middle-class, blue-collar family wasn't something that I saw any value in at the time. Now that I look back, I'm like, thank God I didn't come from money, I didn't inherit wealth, or have to marry somebody to become wealthy. I'm wealthy because of the choices I've made, number one, and the hard work I've put in. But I also have an amazing husband. As I mentioned, we've been married for 25 years. And also the time I have spent working on my own money and mindset. And the best news of all for all of you, it can be anyone's. If I can do it with my background and my experience, anyone can do it. But I learned a lot from my parents, and they were very innovative, and they would buy homes and then remodel them to create apartments. And at one point they had 18 or 20 apartment units, and they were hands-on. And it's no wonder I'm such a serial entrepreneur and that my husband and I have made millions in real estate. I mean, right now we're building this mansion. Anyway, it's made me more focused on what I'm doing to give back. And part of this podcast is part of that. So it's all good. But the one thing that was critical about the situation growing up was that the millionaires who I met when I was a waitress had lives that were everything mine wasn't. They could buy what they want. They ate what they wanted. They gave me great tips. They traveled where they wanted to. And it was so exciting. And what I realized at that point in my life, that the thing missing in my life was money. And while my family didn't view people with money favorably, at the time, I realized that once I had money, everything in my life would be amazing. Now, what's fascinating about this is that a lot of people grow up with families that don't really look favorable with people who have money, grow up the same way. I did not. Sometimes I'd pick up the graveyard shift, and one of the local millionaires who became my first mentor, he actually hired me to do research, and I'll talk about that in a future episode. He would come in after drinking, and he would sit and talk with me for hours. And at this point, I realized I wanted to have money, but I also wanted to have an amazing life. His life was kind of sad. I mean, he didn't really have anyone. I thought he had been married, but then somebody else said no, he had girlfriends, but he just didn't have a great life from a standpoint of personally. And, I think the one thing that situation taught me is that having a fulfilled and wealthy life is really the ultimate goal. Money is nothing if you don't have fulfillment in your life and you don't really have the things that really matter. But regardless of your past, embrace and learn from it. Plan for your future and live in the present. I am so glad that I grew up in a blue-collar family where we didn't have a lot of money. I look at my kids, and as hard as I have tried, and I have tried very hard to not give them too much and make them work for their money, they're entitled. They just feel that they deserve it because they're my kids. It's just fascinating. As I mentioned, I grew up in South Dakota, and I hated every minute of it. I graduated on a Tuesday and left for Colorado on a Friday. I then established residency in Colorado and went to Colorado State for 2 years. And then I realized I needed to live in a city because there were more opportunities to make money. So I transferred to ASU, where the out-of-state tuition was less than the in-state in Colorado. And my best friend transferred at the same time, and he went to San Diego State. But I couldn't afford to go to San Diego State. So the one thing that was unfortunate is it would have been great if I could have afforded to, go to San Diego State. I probably would have. But anyway, I'm glad I went to Arizona State and I got my BS in finance and I got my emphasis in psychology because my professor told me that because I was young and attractive that I had to get a degree that was serious. I had to either do accounting or finance. So I got finance because I couldn't imagine being an accountant. And then I got an emphasis in psychology. Lesson 10 was to become a master at asking questions. So my BFF at Colorado State, who went to San Diego State, so we were inseparable. When I first met him, I kid you not, he is like a GQ model. He was so good looking. And when I saw him, I'm like, oh my gosh. But we met, it was funny because at one point I liked him. He didn't really like me. And then he liked me. I didn't like him. And we're just better off being BFFs. But he came from a super wealthy family. In fact, his father was the brains behind Bennigan's. His father would come into town and I literally would ask him 110 questions. I'm sure he was so exhausted by the end of dinner because we'd go out to dinner and Donnie would always bring me. I'm sure he's like, I want to see my son, but I had to go because I was his BFF. And I would ask him question after question after question. I was just fascinated. But I did the same things with the millionaires at the restaurant. And by asking questions and really listening, you learn so much valuable information. Lesson 11, there are always options. And the problems in our lives are really challenges that lead us to success. When I was in college, I realized that if I was ever going to get out of the life I grew up in, I had to make money. And so I went to a career counselor to find out what my options were to have a job where I had unlimited upside because I wanted to become rich. And so it was pretty funny. And I did want to serve people, number one, and to make money. So I was all about serving people. That I was always really clear on. So she gave me a lot of options. And I ended up choosing financial planning because it allowed me not only to help others, but also to make money, unlimited money. So she said I needed experience. So, I'm innovative. I am resourceful. So I got out of Yellow Pages. It kind of dates me. And I started going through the phone book on all the financial planning firms, starting with the A. And I got to Beckwood Financial. No one before that would hire me. Some guy actually laughed at me and said, no one's going to hire you. You have no experience. They agreed to let me work for them for free to get experience. So I was in Arizona without air conditioning in my car. I had to drive 45 minutes each way, and I would have to take a change of clothes and deodorant because by the time I got there, I was drenched in sweat. But after the first day, they were so impressed, they agreed to pay me $5 an hour, and so I didn't have to work for free. What was really interesting was that I learned early on the importance of having an upside in revenue. A lot of people work time for money models. I get it. And it's not that you can't be okay financially doing that. But if you want to become wealthy, you've got to have some type of entrepreneurial venue and one that allows you to earn an upside of revenue. So I had a variety of job offers, but all were around 60 to 80K. Now, granted, this was in 1989. So, that wasn't a bad income then. But I'm like, I don't want to be making $80,000 a year. How in the heck am I ever going to get ahead? So I graduated with a BS in finance from ASU and an emphasis in psychology. And I went to a job fair. And one of the largest financial firms in the U.S. was there. And they hired me with an agreement to do an internship. And at the end of 6 months, I could be my own agent. And what that meant is I have no base salary, but I'd have an unlimited upside. And I was ecstatic. So fast forward 6 months, and the manager says, Annette, I need to talk to you. And you know that feeling you get in your stomach when it's like, this is not good? He said, you're young, you're attractive, and you're a female. You don't have what it takes. You'll never make it. Now, I've told this story a few times. It used to just bring tears to my eyes every time I heard it. But I was like, what? And I can again remembering at that point in time where I'm like, what am I going to do? Like, it didn't dawn on me I have other options because I was so focused in on the fact that he was not going to let me be my own agent. But then he said, but you are smart and you're driven. So you can work for, ironically, the other minority in the office. So me and the other minority in the office were down at the other end of the hall. And I mean, this is important. I know this might upset people, but it's the truth, important. That guy's told me that the only women making it in the financial services industry were sleeping with their clients. Now, this is what's so embarrassing about that is I actually believed it. Like, I was like, oh my gosh, that's why there's no women. Oh, it's just so naive. But anyway, make a long story short, I can remember driving home crying and my mom's like, that is just ridiculous. But fortunately, I quit and I went and I worked for another firm, but I was so angry for about the next 3 or 4 years. I plotted like what I was going to do when I was a millionaire. I never envisioned I'd be more than a millionaire, and what I was going to say. And when I was successful and oh my God, it was so demented. But thank the Lord above, because at the time I didn't even know what a worth barometer is. We dive into the worth barometer in episode 3, themillionaireinsider.com/3. But what's fascinating about that was that I just remember thinking, I'm spending so much energy on this. If I just started focusing on helping clients and focusing on the impact I could make and being the best person I can be, I'm going to be further ahead. I may not ever be wealthy. I may not ever be a top producer, but at least I'll be happy, content, and I'll be doing better than I would be if I didn't. Thank goodness I got that. Because fast forward 4 years from there, my first $1 million deal, that manager who told me you don't have what it takes, she'll never make it, had been trying to close that deal for over a decade. That, my friends, is the power of living above the grid. So lesson 12, the only person who gets to decide if you make it is you. You're the only one. And when you get that, everything changes. Lesson 13. Understanding income and wealth. So shortly after graduating college, I realized that the goal was to become rich, which equates to income. And if you start paying attention, you'll see that everywhere you go, the measuring stick of success is income. How much money people make, or a better one is how much they pay in taxes. That's just basically an acceptable way of bragging about how much money they made. Every award is about how much money you make. And it's why so many people are broke. Rich equates to income. And that was my focus until I learned from one of my first millionaire clients who said, Cole, is not rich or income. It is net worth and wealth, not earning money, but creating and accumulating wealth and assets. So if you understand what your wealth is or what your net worth is, it's your assets less your liabilities, what you own versus what you owe. Now, I'm fortunate that I've been debt-free for over 20 years, and I achieved my crazy net worth goal in 2021. You can learn more about this when I dive into the tactical process I use to become a millionaire, including saving, purchasing real estate, funding retirement at themillionaireinsider.com/6. All right, lesson 14, learning that the goal is creating a fulfilled life. Like, it took me a long time to figure that out. And, it's kind of like you think, oh, you want to be happy. You can never achieve an emotion. That is just something that's like setting you up for failure. Yeah, you can be above the grid more times than you're not, but there are going to be times in your life you're not happy, but you can still be fulfilled. And once you know your purpose, everything changes. Like for me, my purpose right now is really just helping more women, like 10 million to be exact, create financially free lives they love. And I want to have my material out there so that anyone and everyone that wants it, including men, can get it long after I'm gone. And that is my give back. And whatever you do, take the time to create a fulfilled life. I would say that needs to entail money. Like, I've never really seen anyone living a fulfilled life, maybe a monk over in an uncivilized country or where they live in a compound, but like I've never seen anyone that I have met who doesn't have money who has a fulfilled life. So the goal is fulfilled and wealthy. And then lesson 15 is to not only marry the right person, but really choose your inner circle carefully. Marrying the right person is huge because you want to be on the same page and you want to be focused on the same goals. And, getting divorced has a way of really quickly reducing your assets dramatically. So make sure that you take the time and really make clear choices that work for you, that resonate with you, and that are ones that you really can live with. Just a couple other tips. One of the most important things you got to do is know the difference between wants and needs when it comes to how much money you need. The episode 2, themillionaireinsider.com/2, we dive into the spending plan, the affluent budget, and you can get the magical budget. But that's critical. Automating what you can do, delegating is huge. Clarity on the ultimate goal you want, meaning how do you want to feel and what do you want to achieve? And then making sure you're clear on that and that you don't allow your day-to-day feelings to interrupt that. That's critical. Embrace the past, plan for the future, and live in the present. Not everyone's going to love you, and that's okay. With great wealth comes great responsibility. What you focus on expands, so be real clear on what you focus on. Money won't bring you happiness, but neither will poverty. Those are some of my favorite quotes. Congratulations on taking another step to create a financially free life you love. If you're not sure about your financial future or that it's in order, or you are ready to stop worrying about money or possibly the fear of becoming a bag lady, ending up broke in retirement, or you simply are ready to know your financial house is in order so you can have a bright financial future, please go to themillionaireinsider.com/NSF. And that doesn't stand for non-sufficient funds. It stands for Next Step Finance. It's the next best step of what you need to do so you can avoid an NSF notice in your future. Again, themillionaireinsider.com/NSF. The number of women who were not broke or poor while working or married is staggering. The entire mission of the Wealth Inside and Out podcast is to ensure you have the information for you, your family, your friends, anyone who's willing to listen to it and apply it so that you can create a financially free life you love. Again, themillionaireinsider.com/NSF. If you love the content, please follow or subscribe so you can get notified of future episodes. And also, if you love the podcast, please give us a 5-star review and also share a comment. For today's show notes, go to themillionaireinsider.com/5. For all show notes, go to themillionaireinsider.com/podcast. Now, wasn't that easy? I want to just recap on the 15 lessons because I know there was a lot of information, but a lot of them are ones you can start implementing today. As a reminder, I encourage you to list all the nuggets you took from today's call and then prioritize them and just start with the first one. You'll be amazed at the results you get just by beginning. So let's recap. Lesson 1, learn from your experiences. We all have experiences. Some are good, some we might not see as so good. But when we learn from them and see the opportunity in them, that's when amazing things happen. Lesson 2, money gives us choices and more control of what happens in our lives. Lesson 3, we can figure it out. We have what it takes. Sometimes we just have to slow down so that we can see clearly and then figure out what we need to do. Lesson 4, master your mindset. That is so critical. Lesson 5, use and understand your brain and how it works and how those dopamine hits occur and cause us to do crazy things like overspend and eat too much and all the above. Lesson 6, prepare and go with the unknown. There's always going to be unknown, but we can handle this. We can do challenging things in our lives and succeed. Lesson 7, learn how to interact with all kinds of people from CEO to janitor. Lesson 8, don't underestimate anyone. Lesson 9, embrace, learn, and complete the past, plan for the future, and live in the present. Lesson 10, master the art of asking amazing questions. Lesson 11, there are always other options, and problems are really simply challenges that lead us to success. Lesson 12, the only person who gets to decide if you'll make it is you. Oh, that's one of the most powerful lessons I've learned. Lesson 13, understand the difference between rich, income, and wealth. Lesson 14, determine what a fulfilled life looks like to you and then start creating it so you can live it. Lesson 15, marry the right person and choose carefully who gets into your inner circle. So there you have it. I want to thank you so much for joining me today. Until our next episode, take one action that will help you create a financially free life you love. I'm Annette Bau, your host. All international copyrights are reserved. Bye for now.